I hope everyone is having a lovely day. Let's have a look here. We want that one. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen now. As you probably know, because you're here, today I'm going to be talking about supporting junior developers. It's going to be practical tips. I'm going to try to cram a lot of information into this presentation. And the goal here is, of course, to have happy teams and skilled colleagues at the end of the day. As a bit of an introduction, my name is Anna McDougall. I'm a software engineer with Novatech Consulting, and last year I was a junior software engineer, so it's still nice and fresh. Let's keep going and talk about what I'll be covering today. Firstly, I'm going to talk about who I am, why I feel able to talk to you about this theme, and why I think I've got some good insights for you to share. What is it like to be a junior developer? A lot of people, by the time they're leading teams, that feeling might be a distant memory. So let's recap what it's like to be a junior developer. Then we'll talk about the third chapter I've called Welcome, O New and Newbie One. It's about onboarding. It's about check-ins in and around the code itself, of course, what to do when coding issues come up with junior developers. And lastly, I call this avoiding checking out when checking in other words, how to keep a junior engaged and how to keep them open and to keep those lines of communication open as they continue to develop in your team. So let's get started. You might be thinking, who are you, strange lady? And why are you talking to me about this today? Well, simply put, I like to think that I've been on both sides of the junior coin, so to speak. As I mentioned last year, I began with Novatech as a junior software engineer. I came from a very, very different background. I used to be a professional opera singer. And so I came into the industry with a very fresh perspective. And as a result of my also having quite a bit of corporate experience from another previous career, I was able to also take the role of trainee tech lead in a unit with over 30 other juniors, trainees, and new employees of the company. What this meant is that I was both a junior myself and learning the tech stack myself, while also having the responsibility of guiding juniors, helping juniors, and I guess actively sharing what I was learning. So it gave me a very good insight both into what it's like being the new guy, so to speak, but also how I could actively help and support those who are going through it, who maybe, for example, didn't have as much workplace experience and weren't used to working in teams or corporate communication or anything along those lines. So I kind of got to experience both sides of the coin, which of course leads to the natural next question, that what is it like to be a junior developer? Probably most of the people listening to this talk have at some point been a junior themselves. But as I mentioned, maybe it's been a little while since you've been there. So maybe you've forgotten, or maybe things are just a bit different now, given the fast pace and remote work and things like this that you might not have had to deal with. Of course, being who I am, I went onto social media, I went onto LinkedIn and Twitter, and I asked my followers to give me 3 words that they felt best described their experience of being a junior developer. And of course, I had a lovely word cloud produced from it. And as you can see, some of it is quite positive. Exciting is definitely great. But the 2 other biggest words there are scary and overwhelming. And a lot of the feelings around this, intimidation, confusion, these ideas of things being very open, but at the same time that being actually quite terrifying. But of course, we also got hungry. So I don't know, maybe you don't want to take this word cloud too seriously. I don't know. Boring is one, hopefully, that doesn't apply to your company. Common themes. What are some common themes that come up around juniors and their feelings about being juniors? Well, one of the biggest things that I hear is what I call a hangover from a bad boss. So a lot of juniors, and this goes for people who are fresh out of university, as well as people who are in their 30s or 40s and changing careers. A lot of people are working from these backgrounds where they've had bosses who are perhaps, let's say, not the nicest people, maybe micromanagers, maybe they are extremely strict about working times. A lot of people who are changing into tech, and as I said, both at the early stages and later stages of life, have worked in things like the hospitality industry, where things are very different and there is much more of a top-down approach. It is not a collaborative work environment. So they're coming in with this kind of background where you as a team lead or a senior, you are the authority figure, and they as the junior, they consider themselves inferior. It is not a discussion among equals. So that's what a lot of juniors are dealing with. Of course, you come up with the typical things: fear of looking ignorant. Yeah, no one wants to come into a new job and then be the person who knows nothing, right? It's not a nice feeling. Fear of being fired. This is one that I see a lot of seniors really underestimate. We often forget, especially with the job market being as hot as it is right now, we often forget that lots of people are scared of losing this job. If it's their first job in tech, they don't want their first job in tech to end in being fired. They don't want that on their resume. They don't want to go through that feeling. They want to impress people and they want to do a good job. And they are really freaked out, frankly, about the possibility of losing that job. Of course, the belief that everyone else knows more than them. This leads into imposter syndrome, which, if you're not familiar with it, is the feeling that you are the worst in the room, that you don't know what you're doing, and that pretty soon someone will discover how terrible you are. And then, I don't know, you lose your job or experience public humiliation or something along those lines. As I mentioned before, belief in big gaps between themselves and authority. Generally overwhelmed by the breadth of information. Makes sense. Tech is an enormous field. Even if we just go narrow it down into, let's say, front-end development, okay, still not a particularly narrow field anymore. There are so many different tools, frameworks, languages, all kinds of things that people can explore. And when you are first starting, usually you don't have that understanding of the world of tech. You maybe know a little bit of JavaScript or a bit of Python or something that, you know, is kind of familiar, but you come at it from a language perspective. You've got a very narrow idea of what programming is. And then suddenly people are talking to you about pipelines and deployments, and this is a whole other world, and it can be very overwhelming. And of course, the last thing is a lack of comfort around upward feedback or hard questions. By that, I mean when a manager or a team lead is not doing a great job at leading a junior, you will usually not hear about it. They are so keen to please you. They are so keen to be positive and to bring happiness and joy and good things to your team. They are usually scared of giving honest feedback. And that's a challenge, obviously, because it means that you as a senior or a team lead or whoever dealing with juniors, you do have to read between the lines a little bit. You can't just take what they say at face value, which is a shame. So I want to quickly show you this video just to really take you back into the feeling of your first day on the job. Let's see how we go here. This is called Software Engineer Interns on Their First Day. And let's see if you can relate to this.
Hi, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay, so welcome to the company. It's your first day. I will help you on board. So the first thing you want to do is download the CodeDays. So go ahead and clone the Git repository. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, now I see it.
Easy, I know how to do this. Alright, so now you want to go ahead and install npm node git VS Code, or you can use any IDE you want. Then you want to use your email to sign into Confluence for documentation, Azure DevOps, Jira, and GitHub. You got that?
Yeah, It's just downloading.
Yeah, perfect. So we're a pretty diverse company. We use multiple technologies here. So you want to go ahead and also install Python, Java, C#, C++, Selenium.
hashtag.
And once you get that code base set up, you want to go ahead and use the command line to directly install Linux, TypeScript, JavaScript, and set up the configurations. I won't show you that because, it's just, it's pretty simple. So yeah, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I think your screen is lag.
All right, so no questions. Perfect. You seem to be pretty bright. I'll give you your first task right away. It's pretty basic, just to get your feet wet. So basically, you're gonna fix this button.
Oh, okay, that's not too bad.
And then you want to make this button interact from front to back end. It should make exactly 7.5 API calls and return the data to the AWS Cloud WordPress, which is our middle end. But you want to make sure it doesn't bottleneck, so add some multi-threading in the JavaScript. And are you familiar with machine learning?
No.
Yeah, you probably are, right? You new kids are really good with that stuff nowadays. So maybe just add a little bit of unsupervised classification and we can, cluster the HTML attributes. And if you really want to go above and beyond, you can also use Bootstrap to strap everything together at the end. Just pretty simple. I have to jump on another call, so don't hesitate to ask me if you have any questions. And you'll be done with this in like 1 hour, right? So I'll see you then. Good luck.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of how it feels to be a junior developer. Obviously, I really, really hope that wherever you are and whatever team you're in, that is not the experience you're providing to juniors, but it nevertheless captures, I think, how it feels on those first few days, weeks, and even months when you're beginning. And it seems like there is just so much terminology flying around. And this word simple is something we'll also come back to. This is something that it's actually a comment from Reddit of all places, which I think really captures that feeling of being a junior. I assumed that everything I didn't know was common knowledge to everyone else, and I was afraid of looking dumb by asking questions. Over the years, you encounter more and more, good question, I don't know responses that solidify the fact that engineers aren't expected to know everything. And again, this is something that mid-level software engineers, senior software engineers, team leads, project managers, most people who are really solidly in their working life know that engineers are not expected to know everything. They know that Google is part of the job. They know that there are going to be 30 tabs open. They know that Stack Overflow is going to be read often. But juniors don't necessarily know that. I've met plenty of juniors who, for example, think it's a personal failing if they need to Google syntax or if they need to check what a method returns. There are things like that that they really see as, oh my God, I can't believe I don't know this. How could I be so dumb? Why am I so stupid? They use these awful pejorative terms for themselves to basically describe what is to us a very normal process. So it's really important that you take note of this fact because it's something that you might actually have to very directly say to a junior at some point. So we've gone through all these examples. I've thrown a lot of negative feelings at you. Of course, there are a lot of good things about being a junior, but let's try to take all of this stuff and turn it into lessons that you can take away today. So let's talk about when someone is onboarded. The main thing that a junior is asking themselves in their first weeks or months on the job is, what do they expect of me? What do I have to do to show that I deserve to be here? Remembering that to them, they might be thinking, how do I avoid getting fired? That's not how you think about it, but that's how they're thinking about it. And so you need to provide a path for them. Of course, onboarding is a pretty standard part of any company, but on top of that, you should be covering things such as learning. How much learning are they expected to do? How much of it is part of their job? What should they be learning about? Projects. Are they going directly into a project? Are they going to be, I don't know, doing some sort of training program within the company for a while? Are they going to be doing individual projects to kind of get their skills up to a certain level? And what kind of timeline is expected of them? In other words, what do you expect in the first month, 3 months, 6 months, and a year? These kinds of questions provide structure, they provide security, and they give someone really solid guidelines by which they can navigate through their day-to-day work. So in other words, as I said here, create goals that they can latch onto explicitly. That means directly and clearly state the expectations. And this is the big one. Don't wait for them to ask you these questions. Like we saw in that little video, a lot of team leads, unit leads will talk to a junior and then they'll end with, all right, so just ask me when you have any questions. Bye. And as we stated before, a lot of juniors won't ask questions. They're too scared. They're too worried that you will say, well, why don't you know that? I thought you would have known that. You said on your CV that you know JavaScript, and now you're asking me what async is. Like, are you even supposed to be here? Like, these are the kind of scenarios that they're imagining in their head. So you can't leave it up to chance. It's important for you to go out of your way to offer the information, and of course to be available. I hope this goes without saying, but if your schedule is already full, you need to find a way to get someone else to support a junior, because time is the most valuable thing you can give a junior. So here are some examples. I know we've talked about here, what are some expectations? Let's go with the one on the left. So one thing you could say to a new junior is, for the first month or so, you and I will be working closely to have you trained up in Java for the backend, including testing and basic microservices. There is no set timeline for this, but once you feel ready to move on, we'll then start looking into Docker and containerization. The goal is that by about 6 months into your time with us, you'll be comfortable and confident coding the backend for bigger projects. So this is an example of a few sentences that you could say just to give them some guidelines. It's great if you can write this stuff down for them so that they have set notes there, or at the very least encourage them to take notes so that they have something to refer back to. Because the other thing you might have forgotten is that when you start new and fresh in a project and in a team, people talk to you a lot and they throw a lot of information at you. And it can be really hard 1 week later to remember all the conversations you've had the week before. So providing stuff in writing is also a really good practice to get into. Something I do sometimes when I'm talking to people in meetings and I know that there are going to be a few little notes is, as we're talking, I'll actually take some notes in Slack. And then at the end of the call, I just press enter and boom, there are all the notes that kind of cover the points we've spoken about. It makes it super easy. All right, so let's have a look at the code itself. What happens when there's a problem with the code or they don't know something about the code? I mentioned before we would come back to the word simple. I want you to really try to catch yourself doing this. This is a very common thing. I do it all the time. I'm still working on it, but I want to encourage you to work on it as well, to avoid what I call minimizers or assumed knowledge. The words just, simply, only, of course, or easy. So you could say something like, yeah, I'm just going to give you an easy task. It's using a JavaScript async. So of course you could use .then notation if you wanted. You know, this kind of talk, as soon as they don't understand a word in that sentence, maybe, I don't know, async, maybe they don't know what async is, to go back to that. And you've said the word async, they're suddenly going, oh my God, what's async? What's async? And they don't hear the rest of your sentence, but they do hear just, only, of course, easy. And suddenly they feel inadequate because they've hit a word they don't understand. And you're there telling them, this is super easy and you should already know this. So that's something I really want you to try to become aware of. These words are often filler words, and you need to be aware if you use them as filler words in your sentences to try to cut them out as much as you can. Because, as I say in point B here, imagine how it feels if someone comes and says to you, hey, here are some really simple exercises to get you started in Java or whatever. And let's say the person has never done Java before, they start writing it and they don't realize there has to be a main class or something along those lines. And suddenly they can't get this program to run in the way they're used to programs running. And they're sitting there going, oh my gosh, I was told these were easy tasks. I'm stuck and I'm only 5 minutes in. should I even be here? Like, how can I go back to them after only 5 minutes after getting this task? But because you've set it up there as simple exercises, it shuts down the option there for them to feel open to say, hang on, this isn't actually simple for me, because most of them won't have that confidence built up yet to tell you that. I mean, people who have a bit more experience, yeah. I mean, I'm very open and honest when I don't know something. I say, look, I'm going to stop you right there. I have no idea what you're talking about. Let's go back a few steps. But a lot of people don't have that confidence, and especially juniors. So you need to be aware of how you set them up when you're giving them exercises and tasks. And I've also put up here, I missed this before, but the title here is, do they know how little I know? And that's the question that a lot of juniors are asking themselves through this process. So I want you to keep that in mind. They're saying, oh my God, does Dave realize how little I know? Does Sally know that I've never done object-oriented programming before? And basically that's something that you just need to be aware of, that's how they're thinking when they're asking you these questions. So let's say that you have a great junior and they've come to you and they've said, I'm stuck. I'm trying to solve this problem, but I just don't know what I'm doing anymore. The typical instinct, and I'm totally guilty of this, the typical instinct of the senior developer in this case is to solve the problem. Oh, you've got a problem with your tests? Here, let me have a look. Oh yeah, you just need to change this word to that word and add a semicolon there and you'll be fine, all right? I want to encourage you to try your best not to do that. Obviously, if it is just a comma or something, yeah, okay. But even then, I would say it's better for you to say, oh, okay, well, let's have a look at, your parameter list. Is there maybe something missing that might indicate what's wrong here? Or how many parameters does the program think you have right now? And how many are you actually trying to give it? Ask them leading questions to try to get them to land at the same conclusion. And as you're guiding them, I've said here, keep an eye out for the moment. And that's like, to me, that's the opposite of the aha moment, right? The aha moment, we all love the aha moment, but what you're looking for is actually not the aha moment. You're looking for the moment. And that is when they check out, right? When you say, oh yeah, well, let's have a look at the Docker file. And they go, that's your moment. That's when you go, oh, okay. They don't know what a Docker file is. They've never worked with Docker before. Let's go back a few steps. So when we're starting a ticket, how does this look like? When they're starting a ticket, you want to help them get started. You want to say, what kind of problems could come up when solving this? Should this parameter be a number or a string? Why? For example, that's a common one for phone numbers that I often see. What kind of tests should we write for this? Do we need to mock anything with these tests? These are questions that you can ask at the beginning of a ticket just to get them thinking about the whole process. And if they get stuck, you want to ask questions like, okay, what have you already tried? And if you do know the answer and they need a bit more of a hint, saying something like, have you heard of, I don't know, wire mock? Have you heard of async programming? You kind of give them that option to say, no, I haven't heard of that, right? You open it up to them rather than saying, oh yeah, let's just use wire mock. It works like this, blah, blah, blah. Well, you then don't know how much they know. And it's important for you to gauge that so that you can break things down at a level they actually understand. Because the worst thing for them and for you is for you to spend an hour explaining a concept and then at the end of the meeting, they're logging off going, I have no idea what just happened in that hour. You've just wasted an hour of your time and you've wasted an hour of their time. So by taking it a bit slower and actually asking them where they're at and changing your language and your solutions to help guide them rather than give them answers, you are then saving everyone in the long run. You're actually saving a lot of time and you're helping them become better developers, which is what we all want here. And the other thing, as we said before, is to model ignorance. I as much as the next person, I love looking smart. But in this case, I want to encourage you to be really open with juniors, especially. I mean, I think you should do this with everyone, but especially with juniors. I don't know is a valid answer. I don't know. Let's have a look together. Do a Google search together. The other thing I recommend here is to invite them into a ticket you're doing. So maybe you're working on a more complex project or a more complex ticket, and you can say, hey, I'm just about to start this ticket. I thought maybe you'd want to come in and see what I do to break down a problem before I begin it. Or I like to do mind maps. Do you want to see how I do them? Invite them into your processes and show them how you actually go about structuring your thoughts, because that will help them learn ways for them to structure their thoughts. The other thing are check-ins. Again, going back to this idea, I hope I don't get fired, is what a lot of juniors think when they're called into a meeting. And that is why I want to encourage you, especially if you're a unit lead or a mentor, to have a regular schedule. Don't just randomly message your juniors from time to time like, hey, want to have a meeting? Because although it's just a check-up or a check-in, to them, they might be like, oh God, what did I do? What have I done wrong? What have I broken? Which code base have I messed up? What is about to happen? And you don't want them coming in with that level of stress. I've read stories about juniors who are told on Friday, let's have a meeting on Monday, and they spend the whole weekend barely getting any sleep because they're convinced that this error they made on Wednesday is about to get them fired. Whereas in reality, it's just a check-in, right? So try not to surprise them. And this kind of goes back to the idea of plans and expectations. Be really clear. Hey, we're going to meet on Monday at 2 p.m. Hopefully every Monday at 2 p.m. if that suits you, or every second Monday, whatever. And we're going to talk about this, this, and this. Bring any ideas you have for X or whatever. And I'm looking forward to chatting to you then. Make it really clear that this is not you about to fire them. And I hope that you never have to outwardly say, I'm not going to fire you, but maybe you do. The other thing is to bend professionalism. I mean, obviously, I'm not natively German, I'm Australian, and we are a lot more relaxed about sharing our personal lives with other people and being very open and friendly with other people. I know this is not for everyone, but I would encourage you to break down a bit of that barrier of authority. If a junior is coming in like, oh my God, they're the leader and I'm the follower, they're the one up here and I'm the one down here, then what you need to do is find a way to meet in the middle and to show them that you're actually just two people working together and there's nothing to be scared of. And the way to do that is to go a little personal. Say, oh yeah, I spent the weekend having a barbecue with my friends. It doesn't have to be deep, dark secrets, but just showing them a little bit of your personality and your human side can help break down this idea of you being some sort of high and mighty authority figure. Of course, I want to add a proviso here. Never pressure a junior to open up about themselves. Lead by example, open up about yourself. But of course, as I said, some people are just not comfortable with it. And if that's the case, you shouldn't be pushing them to do that. And similarly, if you are a very private person, then, you do you. But I do think that this helps create more of a bond that isn't quite as authoritative. The next thing I want to do is to encourage you to offer custom opportunities. What special interest does this junior have? Oh, you know React, but you've never learnt Vue? Well, I've just looked up that there's a Vue one-day Vue crash course happening online. Maybe we could help you attend that. Or our colleague Jane happens to be a Vue specialist. Would you like to go in and have an hour with her so she can explain the basics to you? Offer custom opportunities based on what they're interested in. It might not even be directly related to their work, but it shows that you know something about them as an individual and not just as a number or as one member of a team. One of the things that was offered to me, my technical lead saw that I had a good natural ability to understand the bigger picture with tech. And so he started inviting me into meetings with our SRE team in Spain. So I had no idea about SRE. I didn't even know about Kubernetes, but I was able to sit there and just soak it in. And I knew that he knew that this was something I would be interested in the long term. And that meant that I could see that he was adapting to me. I mentioned before, you need to read between the lines. A lot of juniors will not be upfront and honest with you about how they're feeling, or if they don't like someone, or if someone is mistreating them because they don't want to cause a fuss and they don't want to get fired. So sometimes you have to go with your gut. Do they seem like their normal self that week? If not, have they given you a decent explanation for why? Or is there something deeper going on here? Can you ask other people, perhaps in their team, how they've been going and if there's any conflict there? Or perhaps not even conflict, perhaps they've just gotten a lot quieter lately. Okay, why? You need to take that extra initiative. The other thing is focus on learning. So rather than focusing on outcomes and productivity and things like this that might really freak out someone who's new, ask like, what are you proud of from the last week? What was one thing you learned? Tell me about a challenge you overcame. How did you do it? What's a problem you've been facing? Make it very clear that you expect there to be problems. You expect them to be learning a lot in a week. And that's fine. And that's part of your check-in. Of course, there's the feedback question. I used to recommend the feedback sandwich, the compliment sandwich, which if you're not familiar with it, involves giving a compliment, giving a bit of harder feedback in the middle, and then giving another compliment to soften it. It's not a bad way to go. But actually, I read this article on the Harvard Business Review, and I've linked it there if you're interested in it. And it's really interesting. And what it says is that the best way to encourage certain behaviors in team members, even friends, kids, I guess the same thing would apply, is actually to emphasize the things they do well. So rather than focus on the moments where something goes wrong or something is not what you would want, focus on the moment where they did the opposite behavior. Like, instead of being like, oh, I've noticed you're very quiet in meetings. Why is that? Say, oh, I really loved how last week you spoke up and said that thing about, I don't know, our tests being miswritten in that file. It was really great to see you openly contribute. So you can probably already tell the difference there between this idea. There is a little bit of a implicit judgment. Why don't you do this? Why are you so bad at what you do? There's this idea versus being like, hey, I really noticed you going out of your comfort zone. I really noticed you contributing and I like that. It gets people feeling a bit better about themselves. It keeps things a bit more positive. And according to this article anyway, I really resonated with a lot of the points that it made, and I really encourage you to read it. And of course, it does happen that sometimes you do need to talk more directly when hard conversations are needed. So sometimes someone really does need a disciplinary talk. Sometimes someone will actually cross a line of, I don't know, discrimination or sexual harassment or something like that, and you will have to talk to them directly. But hopefully then it's also kind of out of your pay grade and moving into the HR direction. So hopefully you won't need to have too many of those conversations. If you do, I recommend looking into the feedback wrap from Management 3.0. So let's summarize what we've just spoken about. I've thrown a lot of ideas at you. I hope that they've resonated and that you've kind of felt that some of them will provide you with things to think about and actions to take. But let's bring it all together. So firstly, let them experience a lack of consequences for failure by actively asking them, what did you learn? What was hard? Bringing all that stuff in, it helps them to understand that failure is actually not going to make them lose their jobs. And of course, on the flip side, let them experience joy at their success. Throw in some nice keywords in here: time, patience, friendliness, errors, pride, support, trust. These are the kind of ideas that should be encapsulating what you do. And time, I think, is actually the most important of all of them. Getting to know them, their skills, both within and outside the code, that is how you will get the most out of that interaction. And so with that said, that brings me to the end of my talk. I know I could have sworn there was another slide in there, but apparently there isn't. Let me have a look because I am sure here, we missed one. Look, this is one more thing I'm just going to throw at you before we go to questions, which is the idea of conversation mirroring. This is actually a really great conversation technique, not only for juniors, but in general, that rather than asking questions about what they've done, you actually mirror what they've said by using different words to say the same things. So here, for example, a junior comes to you and says, I struggled to understand Docker, but by the end of the day, I had built my first image. So rather than saying something that sounds supportive, but actually isn't, like a whole day, wow, well, at least next time it won't take so long now that you have that experience, you know? Okay, you meant it well, you're trying to support them there. I really like that. But what you're saying is, oh, that's unusual. It would take you that long. And suddenly this thing that they feel really proud of, that they worked it out, is suddenly diminished. Suddenly it's not a positive thing anymore. So what you can say is actually mirror it back to them. You built an image. It's a statement of fact, but you're just mirroring back what they said. It must have felt great when it worked, right? You can see here, they've said, I built my first image. The implication is I feel great about it. And you are just mirroring that back to them. You built an image that must have felt great, right? This is a really good technique. It helps people open up and actually invites them to continue talking about their points of pride. So now that I've gone back to that slide, I can go to here and we can slow it down. Please do leave any feedback that you have about the talk today, and I will head on over to the chat and see if anyone has any questions today. Okay. Constantine says, a quick remark, I feel flattered when you pronounce juniors and genius so similarly. Yes, it's funny because I'm Australian. We don't pronounce the R in words very much. So I can imagine that it does sound a bit that way. That's quite funny. I've never thought of that. Thank you. What's the best method to work with a junior that gives up really fast? Ooh, this is a great question. For example, is it normal that you need 4 to 8 hours to solve a problem? Oh, for example, I think you mean it is normal, but some get frustrated too fast and want the skill you got by work over many years in 1 week. I actually don't know how to support that in a good way. Yeah, I mean, I would say there that what can work really well there is actually having the juniors work together, or actually having someone who is at a level closer to theirs work with them on it. One of the things that I think happens when seniors help juniors is that because the seniors understand everything so easily and quickly, it can be really easy for the junior to think, oh, well, I should be understanding everything that easily and that quickly. Whereas I would, when they're talking to other juniors, they're like, oh, hang on, what's push again? Like, what does that do? Oh, I don't know either. Okay, well, let's look it up. You know, and it encourages them to slow down. I would say, let me think about this question again. What's the best method to work with a junior that gives up really fast? I mean, the obvious thing is to say to them quite directly, this takes time, like slow it down. You could also perhaps state openly an expectation about how long it would take. It's sometimes tricky, but maybe if you give them a task you think will take them 4 to 8 hours, tell them that they have 3 days. So you actively give them a much longer time frame. And then when they do 4 to 8 hours, they'll feel like they're a genius, genius juniors. So I don't know, that's just an idea I had there. Other than that, I can't see any more questions in chat. I might stop sharing now. I hope everyone has had a chance to scan the code. Oh, here we are. Okay, I am still stuck on my presentation screen. There we go. Splendid talk. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Constantine. I really appreciate that. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please also feel free to unmute. I'm happy to chat to anyone about anything. Otherwise, I guess we would wrap up early, which might be nice for anyone wanting to kick off and have Feierabend. Thanks, Alexander. Okay. Thanks, Georg. Yeah, you're welcome, Willie. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I know I want to say, I guess, I know that not every senior or tech lead out there is a natural with social skills, and it can take time to work on them. As with any skill, I believe it can be learned. As with any skill, it takes time and practice. So if these are things that don't come naturally to you, that's fine. Just choose maybe 1 or 2 things from my presentation and try to enact those, and then just see how they go. Calvin, my team is pretty small, and there are parts of the code base in which only a single engineer is experienced. When I joined the team, they set up a couple of group programming sessions where the owner of a component would walk me and another senior through this part of the code base together. Very nice. The other senior would be someone who does not usually come into contact with this component, and would thus also learn this from scratch. This created a great learning experience. Highly recommend trying this out. That's a great idea. Yeah. I mean, it should go without saying, but maybe it needs to be said that pair programming and mob programming is a great way to show gaps in knowledge. It still surprises me sometimes when I'm talking to a developer, a back-end developer with 10 years more experience than me, and I use a front-end term and they say, oh, that's not my area. I have no idea what you're talking about. And I love it. Like it's a great thing, because I'm a developer with about 2 years now under my belt in total of tech. And to hear someone with that much experience say, you're the expert on this, I know nothing, it's a great feeling, and it really helps. Oh, thanks, Mehrtap. Yeah, always happy to receive feedback as well. The other thing is, of course, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at Anna J. McDougall. I love tweeting about junior developers and about career changes. So if you have any questions at all about what it's like or what you can do better, or maybe even in a month or 2 from now, some situation comes up and you go, oh crap, I don't know how to deal with this. Feel free to send me a message. I'm always happy to help. You'd rather use your own emojis. That's great. Cool. All right. Well, that went faster than I expected. I normally take way too long, and somehow I got through it faster than usual. So hopefully that's okay with everyone. Yeah, have a great Feierabend, everyone. Mehrtap, you can also go relax after a long day, and I hope you all have a wonderful week. So thank you, everyone. Bye.